American bison, commonly called buffalo. 250 years ago, almost 60 million of them roamed the North American continent, the largest accumulation of mammals of one species ever found on Earth. Less than a century later, the great herds had been slaughtered into near extinction. To a handful of concerned people whose sacrifices and thinking convinced government to take action, we owe the survival of the species. For hundreds of years, the plains of North America were dominated by buffalo. At their peak, they occupied nearly half the North American continent. Buffalo lived and traveled in small bands within larger herds. Each band had animals of both sexes and all ages. A bull, when fully mature at 7 or 8 years, stood over 6 feet at the shoulders and weighed as much as a ton or more. The hump was the buffalo's distinguishing feature. Cows were about half as heavy. Like domestic cattle, the buffalo had a cloven or divided hoof. If undisturbed, they usually moved slowly. But they could run at speeds approximating 35 miles an hour for short distances, and trot for miles without appearing to tire. Calves usually were born in April, May, and June. Five to 6 weeks later, the calf began to graze, but still relied on its mother for milk. The senses of smell and of hearing were highly developed, but sight was poor. Although buffalo appeared to be peaceful animals, they were dangerous, capable of wheeling and charging quickly. The principal food of the great herds was buffalo grass, tolerant of cold, aridity, and much trampling. There was usually enough forage for other animals to share the range. The plains and open woodlands provided good pasture even in winter. By the time the first snow fell, calves had been weaned. Coats of long hair had grown, enabling the buffalo to survive severe blizzards and extreme cold. In spring, the heavy coats were shed, often hanging tattered and matted. Then insects became bothersome. Wallowing in dust or mud offered some protection. With plenty of food and few predators, buffalo sometimes lived 30 years or more. Near the Madison River in Montana is a high cliff at the edge of a large plain. At the base of the cliff, archaeologists are still finding remains of large numbers of buffalo killed here. Before the Spanish brought the horse into North America, some Plains Indian tribes used buffalo jumps as a way of hunting. Indian hunters on foot drove small herds of 50 to 100 buffalo onto a plain behind the cliff. Then, it is believed, they were stampeded and channeled in the direction of the brink by Indians shouting and waving in line along these stone markers. With the sheer mass and weight of the herd running behind them, there was no way for the leaders to stop. Over the cliffs they plunged, followed by the others. At the Madison River Buffalo Jump, you can still see the teepee rings, stones arranged in a circular pattern that held down the edges of the teepees where the Indian tribe lived during the hunt. The buffalo supplied not only food, but materials for shelter, clothing, fuel, and weapons. With the horse, hunting methods changed. Even then, the Indian killed only what was needed by the tribe. By 1800, as a result of population growth and westward expansion, buffalo east of the Mississippi were gone. Reduction of the vast plains herds began about 1830. Buffalo were killed in increasing numbers for food, robes, bones, and just for sport. Construction of the railroads hastened the killing. Railroads organized hunts. At the height of the slaughter, between 10 and 20,000 men were hunting and skinning buffalo for hides. The U.S. Army encouraged the hunting to control the Plains Indians, who, deprived of their principal source of food, could be more easily subdued. In less than 40 years, the most extensive slaughter of game animals the world has ever seen was over. By 1883, less than 300 wild buffalo remained in North America, and of these, only about 50 were in the United States. While destruction of the great wild herds was going on, small captive herds were being fostered and developed by a number of people. From one of these, the Pablo Allard herd in Montana, most of the buffalo we see today in national refuges and parks have descended. The first serious effort to save the species in the United States and Canada began in 1893 and 94. Then, almost simultaneously, breeding stock from private herds was purchased to save the species in Yellowstone and to try to establish new herds in Canada. By popular subscription, the American Bison Society raised money to buy buffalo. Congress was then persuaded to establish the National Bison Range to protect the 40 animals. Today, approximately 500 buffalo live on 19,000 acres in this Montana refuge. In 1907, another federal herd was started when the New York Zoological Society donated 15 buffalo to the Wichita Mountains Refuge in Oklahoma. Remnants of the original fencing that held these animals can still be seen. With more undeveloped land available, protected herds in Canada experienced a rapid increase. About 16,000 buffalo now range through the vast Wood Buffalo National Park. In the refuge areas that have been established, condition of the range as affected by use determines the number of animals the area can support. To keep the herds in balance with their food supply is an important part of the management program. Learning how to handle these unpredictable and dangerous animals on a controlled, protected range is another. Each year, excess animals for which there is not sufficient food or water are removed. First, they are tagged and weighed.
3DKK 4002.
Then they are sold at auction for exhibition purposes, for breeding, or for meat.
The big one's the one we're selling, this right up here now. He's about half gentle, boy. He's just right for your mother-in-law to leave now. This is the right guy. Oh, I've got 200, 200.
Sale of these surplus animals serves to make the refuge area partially self-supporting. Buffalo buyers from 10 states paid over $28,000 for 92 animals at this auction. Some of the largest herds in North America today are privately owned and operated to supply the demand for buffalo meat. Raising the animal is not easy. Every attempt to domesticate the buffalo has failed. It remains wild and dangerous. Although a relatively hardy animal, a few diseases of our domestic cattle also infect buffalo. One of these, brucellosis, a frequent cause of bovine abortion, results in severe economic losses to livestock owners. It is also transmittable to man as undulant fever. Testing for the disease is made by blood sampling. Tags are affixed to the skin to identify the animal and the blood sample. When testing is completed, infected animals are eliminated from the herd. There are now more than 100 private owners of buffalo herds. From near extinction in 1900, the buffalo in North America now numbers approximately 30,000 animals. The population is not likely to increase greatly due to limited availability of land suitable for pasture. The monarch of the plains, however, has been saved. Hopefully, the lesson of the buffalo will serve to remind us that it is not too late to save many other endangered animal species.